girlfriend left me, but I did this and now she begging for another chance. When I first met Amelia, it felt like the kind of moment you only read about in books. She was radiant, smart, funny, and full of life. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party, and from the moment we started talking, the rest of the room faded into the background. She had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world when she spoke to me. Our connection was effortless. The conversation flowed naturally, and there was no pretense, no awkwardness. She laughed at my terrible jokes, and I found myself captivated by the way she saw the world. She was driven, passionate about her work in marketing, and ambitious in a way that inspired me rather than intimidated me. From that night on, we were inseparable. For the first 2 years, our relationship felt like a dream. We traveled together, explored new restaurants every weekend, and spent countless late nights talking about our goals and aspirations. Amelia always said she admired my passion for my work, even though my job in IT wasn't as flashy as hers. "You're one of the smartest people I know," she told me once, her head resting on my shoulder. "And I love that you're so grounded. You make me feel safe." Hearing those words made me feel like I had found someone who truly saw me for who I was, not just what I could offer. But looking back, I should have noticed the small cracks forming beneath the surface. Amelia had always been career-driven, but things changed when she got a new job at a prestigious marketing firm. It was a big step up, and I was genuinely proud of her. But along with the new job came new coworkers, particularly Liz. Liz was the kind of person who thrived on gossip and drama. She carried herself with an air of superiority, always making snide comments disguised as jokes. At first, I brushed it off when Amelia mentioned her. But then, little things started to change. Amelia became more self-conscious about our relationship, suddenly worried about how we looked together in public. She started making comments about my choice of clothes, how I could be a little more polished for work events. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured she just wanted me to make a good impression. But then she started mentioning what her coworkers said about me. Or, more specifically, what Liz said about me. It started subtly. "Liz thinks it's cute that we've been together for so long," Amelia said one evening, swirling her wine glass. "She says relationships like ours are rare these days." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds nice." Amelia hesitated before adding, "Yeah, but she also said she doesn't understand how I settled down so quickly. She thinks I should be exploring my options." That was the first red flag. I frowned. "And what do you think?" She shrugged, avoiding my gaze. I told her she was being ridiculous. But I guess I do wonder sometimes what it would be like if we had met later in life. The conversation left a bitter taste in my mouth, but I let it go. I trusted Amelia, and I refused to believe some office gossip could shake what we had built. I was wrong. After that first conversation about Liz's comments, things slowly began to shift between Amelia and me. At first, it was subtle, almost unnoticeable. She became more self-conscious about how we appeared in public, especially around her colleagues. She started dressing more formally for casual outings, fussing over the smallest details in a way she never had before. If we went out for dinner, she'd suddenly ask me to wear something a little more refined, instead of my usual jeans and polo. "You look great," she would say with a tight smile. "But Liz thinks first impressions matter, and I want my coworkers to see us as, a power couple." At first, I played along. I figured she was just adapting to her new work environment and wanted us to present a polished image. But then, the comments about my career started. Liz had planted a seed in Amelia's mind, and it was growing fast. "You're really smart, babe," she told me one evening, running her fingers through her hair absent-mindedly. "Have you ever thought about switching to a more high-profile career?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. "I mean, IT is great, but Liz keeps saying how dating should be about finding someone who matches your ambition. She jokes that I'm out of your league, and that I could be with someone more successful." I stared at her, stunned. "And what do you think?" She sighed. "I think Liz is a little blunt sometimes, but she's not wrong about everything. We are in different worlds now. My work is fast-paced, high-profile. You're more comfortable where you are." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. "You knew who I was when we got together," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Did you ever think I wasn't ambitious enough for you? No, of course not, she said quickly. She trailed off, looking frustrated. That was the moment I realized something important. She wasn't just relaying Liz's words. She was starting to believe them. After that conversation, things spiraled. She started working later and later, always claiming it was because of important projects. But I noticed she had more and more work dinners that didn't involve me. She started spending weekends networking with colleagues, even when I reminded her that we had plans. And then, she stopped saying I love you first. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. This was the woman who had once called me the love of her life, the person who had promised we'd build a future together. I told myself she was just stressed, that we'd find our way back to each other. But deep down, I knew. I was already losing her. Then came the night that changed everything. She invited me to dinner at an upscale restaurant, something she usually did when she wanted to celebrate. I walked in expecting a nice evening together, hoping we'd reconnect. Instead, I walked straight into my worst nightmare. Sitting across from me, Amelia looked composed but distant, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "We need to talk," she said softly. I felt my stomach drop. The moment Amelia uttered those words, "We need to talk," I felt my stomach tighten. It was the phrase people used when something bad was about to happen, and I knew, deep down, that whatever she was about to say would change everything. The restaurant was bustling around us, filled with the sounds of clinking glasses and quiet laughter. But in that moment, it felt like we were in a vacuum. I set down my menu slowly, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "Okay," I said evenly. "Let's talk." She exhaled deeply, as if preparing herself. "I've been thinking a lot about us," she began, stirring her wine absent-mindedly. "And I don't know if we're right for each other anymore." I felt the air leave my lungs. Even though I had seen the warning signs, hearing her say it out loud was like taking a punch to the gut. "Why?" I asked, my voice calm despite the storm brewing inside me. She hesitated. I feel like we're in different places. We have different ambitions, different lifestyles. And I don't know if I see us going in the same direction anymore." I narrowed my eyes. "Is this about Liz?" Amelia looked uncomfortable. She may have pointed out some things I hadn't thought about before. I let out a humorless laugh. "So, let me get this straight. You're breaking up with me because your coworkers, people who don't know me, think I'm not good enough for you?" "It's not about them," she snapped, her voice rising before she composed herself. "It's about me. I want a certain kind of life, and I don't think we align anymore." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my emotions in check. "So, what? You just woke up one day and decided I wasn't high-profile enough for you?" She flinched but didn't deny it. That was all I needed to know. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. "You know, Amelia, I thought we were a team, that we supported each other. But I see now that I was wrong. Please don't make this harder than it has to be," she said softly, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled away. "No," I said. "You already made it hard." I stood up, tossing enough cash on the table to cover the bill. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Amelia," I said, my voice steady. "But don't come crawling back when you realize you threw away something real for a fantasy." She looked like she wanted to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked out, leaving her sitting alone in the restaurant. I had no idea how soon my words would come true. I walked out of that restaurant feeling numb, my emotions swinging between anger, sadness, and disbelief. Amelia had just thrown away our years together because of what? Her coworkers' opinions? Some shallow notion of status and league? It made no sense. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the city lights blur past me as I processed everything. Maybe she really believed what she had said, that we were heading in different directions. Or maybe she had been looking for an excuse to leave all along. Deep down, though, something still didn't add up. I didn't have to wait long to find out why. It had been barely 5 hours since Amelia had broken up with me when fate decided to twist the knife even deeper. I had stopped by a local bar to clear my head, but the last thing I expected was to run into her, and certainly not with someone else. I was standing at the bar, nursing a whiskey, when I heard a familiar laugh. A laugh that once belonged to late-night conversations and inside jokes. My heart clenched as I turned, and there she was. Amelia, sitting at a dimly lit booth, leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize. They were talking animatedly, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her expression warm and engaged. For a moment, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a work friend, maybe just an innocent conversation. But then, as if to confirm my worst suspicions, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. And she let him. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. She hadn't even waited a day. The realization hit me like a freight train. This wasn't just a breakup. She had moved on before she had even officially ended things with me. The dinner, the breakup speech, all of it had been carefully planned. I had been nothing more than a formality. I exhaled slowly, setting my drink down. My hands clenched into fists as a wave of anger crashed over me. But then, it faded. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to confront her. She wasn't worth it. Instead, I walked past the booth deliberately, making sure she saw me. And she did. Her laughter died instantly as her gaze met mine. Her eyes widened in shock, guilt flashing across her face like a neon sign. The guy she was with turned slightly, following her line of sight, but he looked completely unfazed, like he knew exactly who I was. That only made it worse. She had moved on with confidence. I gave her the smallest nod, an acknowledgement of what I had just witnessed, and then I walked right out of the bar without looking back. Let her sit in her own mess. Let her deal with the weight of her choices. Because I was done. That night, as I lay in bed, the heartbreak I expected never came. The sadness had already been replaced by something else, clarity. Amelia hadn't just left me. She had been planning this for a while, letting Liz and her toxic co-workers poison her mind, convincing herself that she deserved more. But more of what? A guy who knew she had just been in a relationship hours earlier? A man who was comfortable taking advantage of her indecision and insecurities? She wasn't upgrading. She was downgrading. And someday, she would realize that. The next few days were a blur of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and an odd sense of relief. It hurt to know Amelia had moved on before she had even ended things with me, but in a way, it also set me free. I had spent so much time wondering what I had done wrong, but now I knew. It wasn't me. It was them. Amelia might have been the one to break up with me, but Liz was the mastermind behind it all. She had poisoned Amelia's mind, planting doubts, feeding her insecurities, and convincing her she deserved something better. And that's when I decided Liz needed to be exposed. I had never cared much for office gossip, but I had enough mutual connections in Amelia's industry to know that Liz had a reputation for being two-faced. She wasn't just manipulative. She was ruthless when it came to climbing the corporate ladder. So I started digging. I reached out to a friend who worked at the same company, someone who had always been friendly with me despite Liz's influence. "Hey," I texted. "I know this is random, but what's the deal with Liz? I feel like she had a personal vendetta against me." My friend didn't hesitate. "LOL, you have no idea. She's been talking trash about you for months. She even said Amelia should keep her options open before you two got engaged." That confirmed what I had suspected. Liz had been sowing doubt long before Amelia even realized it. Then came the real bombshell. "She's actually up for a promotion," my friend continued. "But there's a big review process, and HR's been keeping an eye on her because she's had complaints from other employees." That's when the plan started forming in my head. Exposing the manipulation. I decided to be strategic. Instead of going after Liz directly, I let her own words do the work for me. I compiled every message I had from Amelia that referenced Liz's toxic influence. The ones where she said things like, "Liz thinks I could do better. Liz says relationships should be about ambition. Liz keeps telling me I'm in the wrong league." Then, I reached out to HR at Amelia's company under an anonymous tip. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply sent them screenshots of Liz's words, evidence of her manipulation and toxic behavior. And then I waited. 2 weeks later, my friend texted me with the update I had been waiting for. Damn. Liz got pulled into a meeting with HR. Someone reported her for creating a toxic work environment and meddling in personal relationships. I couldn't help but smirk. Another week passed, and then I got the final update. Liz didn't get the promotion. Turns out, when HR started looking into her, they found enough dirt to justify keeping her exactly where she was, stuck. No raise, no new title, no stepping stone to power. She had spent months sabotaging my relationship, thinking she was untouchable. But in the end, she sabotaged herself. Not long after Liz's downfall, Amelia reached out. It was late one evening when I saw her name pop up on my phone. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity got the best of me. I answered, "Hello?" There was silence on the other end before she finally spoke. I made a mistake. I let out a slow breath. Which part? Breaking up with me, or listening to Liz? Both. She sounded miserable, and part of me should have felt vindicated. But instead, all I felt was nothing. "It doesn't matter now," I said simply. "You made your choice." "I know," she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing." "But Liz..." I cut her off. "Liz didn't force you to do anything, Amelia. She might have manipulated you, but you let her." There was nothing left to say. After a long pause, Amelia finally sighed. "I guess I just wanted to hear your voice one last time." I didn't answer. Instead, I ended the call and blocked her number. Some things weren't worth revisiting. Hanging up on Amelia felt like closing the final chapter of a book I had been trapped in for too long. For months, I had been weighed down by anger, betrayal, and the sting of being tossed aside like I wasn't good enough. But the truth was, I was good enough. I had always been. She just wasn't strong enough to see it. And now, as I stood on the other side of everything, I realized I had won in ways I never could have imagined. The relief of blocking Amelia's number was immediate. No more late-night messages, no more guilt-tripping attempts to win me back. I was finally free of her influence, free of the toxic cycle Liz had dragged her into. I spent the next few weeks focusing on myself. I went back to the gym, not to prove anything to anyone, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I reconnected with old friends, people I had unintentionally pushed away while trying to make my relationship work. And most importantly, I stopped questioning my worth. For so long, I had wondered if maybe, just maybe, Amelia and Liz had been right. Maybe I wasn't in her league. Maybe I wasn't enough. But the more time I spent rebuilding myself, the more I realized how wrong they were. It wasn't about leagues. It wasn't about ambition or status. It was about character. And I had more of it in my little finger than Liz and Amelia had combined. One evening, I met up with a mutual friend who still worked at Amelia's company. Over a few beers, he filled me in on the office gossip. "So, guess what?" he said with a grin. "Liz is quitting." I raised an eyebrow. Quitting? She was obsessed with that job. Yeah, well, turns out burning bridges isn't a great career move. She lost out on the promotion. HR's been watching her like a hawk, and half the office thinks she's toxic. She's leaving before they can push her out. I took a sip of my drink, letting the satisfaction settle in. "Karma's a funny thing." "Oh, and Amelia," he added. "She's, not doing great." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She and that guy, the one from the bar, lasted all of 3 weeks. Apparently, he was just using her for fun. She tried to go back to Liz for advice, but, well, Liz had her own problems by then." For a brief second, I felt a pang of pity. Amelia had fallen for the illusion Liz had created. The idea that she could trade something stable and loving for something shinier and more exciting. But life doesn't work like that. And now, she had to live with the consequences of her choices. 1 year after the breakup, I felt like an entirely different person. My confidence was back, my career was thriving, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I met someone new, not because I was looking, but because the universe has a funny way of rewarding those who walk away from toxicity. She was kind, grounded, and saw me for who I was, not who others thought I should be. And the best part? There were no leagues, no status games, no doubts. Just two people who valued each other for exactly who they were. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that self-worth isn't something you measure by other people's opinions. It's not about what your partner's coworkers think, or whether you fit into someone else's world. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to settle for less than what you deserve. Amelia thought she was upgrading. Turns out, I was the upgrade all along. And I couldn't be happier.